Welcome to this evening's program brought to you by the U.S. Botanic Garden. My name is Courtney Burrs, the online education specialist with the learning and outreach team here at the Garden. And we are so happy to have you joining us for the fourth session of the Briny, Boozy, Bubbly, a series of two-part workshops where we have fun with fermenting. This week, we welcome back Shawn Schaffner. And today, Donnie Ronan. I always want to say Danny. We know your name is Donnie. Donnie Ronan of DC Spirits is back as our fearless leader as we make the last night I dreamed cocktail. I'm going to bring back on Shawn Schaffner, our fearless host for this Briny Boozy Bubbly series. And he is going to then introduce our presenter, who is Donnie Ronan, who has been doing food, wine, and spirits education for 27 years. Somebody just had a birthday. He is the founder at DC Spirits and partner at Shaker and Spoon, the award-winning national cocktail subscription service. You all please welcome back Donnie and Shawn. Good to see you, Shawn.
Hey, thanks so much, Courtney. It's really good to be here and to see everybody. Thanks for chiming in the chat. Good to see so many folks back and my neighbors here in Maryland, West Virginia, etc. So it's my pleasure to open us up today and just get us started to remember to taste our green beans and then get it paired with that cocktail. So welcome back to June 26th, where we're going to get into the last night I dreamed with Donnie in just a few hot moments. So I'm Shawn. You'll soon see Donnie again. And please, if you haven't shared yet, and even if you have, let us know your favorite cocktail. It's about to be the last night I dreamed, this herbaceous margarita. But go ahead and let us know your favorite cocktail for right now, tonight in this hot weather. And any goals that you have for this class so that Donnie and I can take those into consideration as we go through our evening. It's a nice chunky hour and a half, but it's gonna go by like that. So our plan today, we're gonna check in with our green beans. We'll do a little tasting, and then we'll talk about our last night I dreamed ingredients. And actually, it's a little change to this. We're gonna go ahead and make our herbaceous syrup right off the bat so that folks who haven't had a chance to do that yet, I got to mine a little earlier today, but I'm excited to be walked through step by step. So we'll have a time to do that. And then we'll get into the ingredients and concocting our last night I dreamed. We'll be able to taste and sense together, pair our pickles and our cocktail, and then have a little time for questions, reflections, and closing. Ooh, Libby, the gin fizz. Stop giving those bartenders. That's the last night I nightmared instead. All right, so firstly, let's just take a look at your spicy dill green beans. These are mine. Now, if you remember from 2 weeks ago now, some of those beans were white, some were kind of a rich green, and some were purple. And as you can see, they've all kind of given their color over to this brine, which has got this really lovely kind of, I don't know, army green sort of view. Thank you so much for doing that. So you can really see there, minus the glare. The purple is completely gone. And this is one of the things I always find really fascinating about the brine. Just another example, I know brine came up last week. These were some asparagus and some colored carrots, some multicolored carrots that I put in here. And this brine, when it started out, was just a saltwater solution, plain and clear like normal. But you can see all that color has given way. And this brine afterwards is a tasty treat in its own right. So, all right, go ahead. I would love to know if you have your pickles in front of you. Give us a little word storm. We can't see them with our eyes, but how does it look? Go ahead and open them up if you haven't yet, and let us know how they smell. If you're ready to take a handle on them, or if you already have, let us know how they feel, the texture of them. I'm especially curious. I know someone 2 weeks ago was maybe going to try making them with frozen beans. I would love to know that texture, and I'd love to know the taste as well. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can kind of see mine in there. My liquid has evaporated just a little bit, so I'm about to head out for a trip, and if I don't like the taste of these, I'm going to add a little bit more brine or salt water, or even just a little bit of distilled water on the top of them, so they'll be good while I'm gone. Let's take a little taste. I hope that you have a bean also, and you're ready to taste with me. And if not, you can now live through my experience. Here we go. Wow. Ooh. Super juicy. Part of what I love about a pickle like this is the brine really gets into those beans. Dänny, you've got yours too? Let's see. Let me maximize that here.
I pickled
you
some
got some-
eggs.
Wow. Oh, that's
Because
lovely.
I love pickled eggs.
So I was going to say, you know, in terms of the brine, one of the things I love to do is to take whatever leftover brine I have. And once it's done, here's an example where this was the brine left over from some pickles. And then I put some cucumbers in these directly and put them in the fridge. Cucumbers don't stay as crispy on your counter, but if you pickle them in the fridge, that brine will still get in there. They'll still have that probiotic vibe to them. Pickled eggs are another great way to use leftover brine. Hard boil the eggs, just stick them in there, put them in the fridge, and you can put them on your counter. But in the fridge, it just gives me a little bit like eggs in the fridge. You know, sounds like a feeling. There's also lots of good herbs in there. All that fennel and dill, dill that we had from before. Even the brine itself. Yeah, you can just give a little sample too. Well, I'd love to hear if you made yours also, how your experience went. Please put that in the chat. I'm going to keep snacking on these. And in the meantime, just also give some reminders that, as you probably saw, your ferments are really juicy and gassy. You can see with this airlock, all that brine that's like coming up the top. And so we do want to keep our ferments on a plate or something like that that's going to help them to gas. And that timer on the left side of the screen is how many times I saw a bubble go up in 37 seconds. You can see that was 7 bubbles in 37 seconds. It's a lot of gas that's being produced inside of our ferments. So just a few tips on that is to, you know, as we reviewed last class, we don't want to seal them completely while they're still fermenting. Once we're done, we can stick them in the fridge and they'll be okay. But while they're still gassy and bubbly, we can burp them if they're closed. We can tilt them if, in this case, where we've got our airlock, I often like to give them a little edge for the air to come up. Just like press them down every once in a while to squish out some of that air. You can even take some liquid out, and then that liquid can be useful when in a few days maybe it's evaporated a little bit, or you can just put that whole jar on a plate. And of course, you should eat some because then you don't have as many pickles inside your jar and you have more space. So after about a week of pretty vigorous fermentation, or in this case, we've had 2 weeks, so it should have slowed down already. You probably saw the bubbles really coming up and the liquid rising during that first week or so, and then it begins to slow down. I know for these, the first week I had them, the liquid was filling my airlock and I had to tilt them, I had to press them down, they overflowed once. But once that time is ended, they kind of settle in and they're a little bit easier. But again, continue to check them. So I'm about to go on this vacation. I'm not just going to leave them with the weight on top. I am going to put them on, give them a little bit of room to cover, and then I can head out for a week without a problem. All right? So if there are any questions, concerns, inspirations, put them in the chat. We want to make sure we have plenty of time for our cocktails. So for now, I am going to keep moving on. But when those questions appear, we'll have time later for Q&A. With that, Dänny, take it away. Tell us what we're doing today.
Howdy. We're going to do first of all, hello, everybody. Hello out there in the universe. We're going to do this great cocktail called Last Night I Dreamed. And it was made by a gentleman here in Alameda, California, named Patrick Natola. And he's originally from Chicago. Made this killer tequila cocktail. And it actually, the reason why I thought we would do this one today is because it was for a shaker and spoon month that was a collaboration between chefs and bartenders. So usually what it is every month, there's a box about yay big, and it has 3 recipes from bartenders around the world. And everything's based off of one base spirit. So it'll be Blanco tequila or Pisco or, bottled and bond bourbon. So every month, all you need is 1 bottle in the box and you can make 12 amazing cocktails. So this particular month that Patrick worked on, he and his chef actually came up with this cocktail together. And that's why this came to me, because it was a very garden-focused drink, being cilantro jalapeno, and 2 things that are used quite often here in California. So now that we're, midsummer, technically summer just officially started last week, and everybody, like half the country is still in storms and half the country is in heat wave. Either way, at least these ingredients are regularly available. So we figured we'd start. So before I get into too many of the details, I actually want to get into the syrup. Shawn, if you can move to the, there we go. So syrups can be made from anything, and we'll get into that. But right now, what I want to do is I actually want to make what's this right here. This is the cilantro jalapeno syrup. That is backwards. No, there we go. Wrong one. There we go. So we're going to make this. I've got one ready to go already, but we're going to make it, and I'll show you how easy it is. So if you focus on this camera 2, you'll see I've already put in, I did a combination of both raw sugar and white sugar, just because it's kind of the flavor I was looking for. I wanted something that was a little more rich. And then I've already, here's my scale, I've already measured the exact amount of water. This is the thing that's really interesting. You can totally do this by visual. So yeah, let's keep this camera on for a minute. Let's say you have a container like this, and you fill it all the way to the top with granulated white sugar. And then you pour that into a third container. And then you take the same container, you pour it all the way to the top with water, and then you pour that into that third container, into that other container again. That's going to be generally close to simple syrup. Now, truly, if you want a real one-to-one simple syrup, you want to do it by weight, which is why I have my scale here. So I did an exact amount of sugar in this bowl, poured it into the pot, and then I did the same exact amount of weight of water. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this up, put a little bit of heat on it. And I'm going to pour that same amount of water in here. Technically, that's going to be the closest possible way to have the exact amount of one-to-one ratio as I'm looking for. And that's something that I find people do all the time. So, Shawn, switch me back to regular camera, pretty please. Let's say you were to take a container like this and you were to fill, you're like, no, I'm going to eyeball this. I'm going to put about this much sugar in, and then I'm going to fill the rest with water. That doesn't work, because although it feels like this is full with sugar, it's still granulated sugar. Imagine a glass container, a glass cylinder filled with golf balls, right? There's a ton of room for water and air in between, which means you're going to be able to put a lot more water in it than you would the actual sugar. So something to keep in mind when you're making simple syrup, the best way to do it is by weight. But if not, take 2 of the exact same container filled all the way to the top with sugar, all the way to the top with water, and then combine them in another container. That's like, for the most part, close enough, but weight is always the best way to do it. I'm only going to do like a really low simmer on this until I throw in the other ingredients, because I don't want it to be too hot. So what I did is I did everything via the scale, and I did a half version of what's on Shawn's website. Shawn's website that shows the how to make the syrup on your own. So I did halves of everything. Now what it wants you to do is X number of ounces of sliced jalapeno. I'm going to put that into the pot, but then it tells you whole cilantro, right? So I'm not going to do anything other than I weighted already, and then I'm going to put that in, and I'm going to smush that in there into the liquid that already has the sugar dissolved in it, and then I'm just going to let that sit. And the ingredients, or the recipe tells you to have it simmer for 5 minutes, and that really is enough. And that's also why you don't chop the cilantro. You want to keep it whole so that it really stays together, because part of this, granted, you could easily strain it out, but it's just one extra thing to do, and you don't really need to do that. So if you look at the instructions, it'll tell you to just keep it simmer. I'm actually going to put a lid on this guy. There we go. Do it really light. In fact, I'm going to move it up.
I would just say I made it this afternoon, and one of my favorite parts was actually eating the cilantro back out of the sugar syrup when it was done.
Oh, yeah.
Very delicious.
Yeah, it's very tasty. And sometimes what I recommend in terms of syrups is to add a little bit of alcohol to it if you want to keep it for a longer amount of time. You don't have to add that much, but between the sugar and the alcohol, it will last longer. But still keep it in your fridge. If it's something you're making on your own, keep it in your fridge. You'll notice that it may start to mold over time, and that's between there being some air in there and there's always going to be some bacteria. None of that's really going to hurt you, but I would make sure that if you see any of it at all, that you, at the very minimum, take those out and also change containers. So you can strain it through fine mesh, you can strain it through a coffee filter into another container, and then make sure to boil the container where you saw some mess. So that has a timer on it already. Let's go back to the making syrup slide. So let's see, can we go back one? Can I control that? No, I guess not. Can you go back one? Yeah. So this is an important thing. Not all things are equal. For the most part, when you're doing cocktail recipes or any recipes, when it just says sugar, nowadays, I find that to be really strange, but industry standard means white granulated if it just says sugar. And for syrups, it's also industry standard because there's only, I want the flavor of the syrup that I'm trying to make to be the main flavor. And I don't necessarily want to have that changed by the style of sugar. There are certain things that work really well. Like for example, one of the really cool sugars that people come to us for often at Shaker and Spoon is Okinawan Demerara. So Demerara sugar is a style, and this is a Demerara from the island of Okinawa in Japan. And it has a really unique flavor. It's otherwise known as black sugar. So the main ones that you see here on the screen are sugar in the raw or raw organic sugar is what you see in this photo. Brown sugar, you all know, can come clumpy. Maple sugar, that's a very distinct flavor. And then palm and coconut sugar. Coconut sugar can come in this style here, these like large crystals, but it can also come as almost a powder. And they're very different. So one of the things that I always recommend to people when they're making things, just taste it along the way. And the most important part, beyond just choosing which sugar you want, and that depends on the thing that you're going to throw into it, is also making sure that you measure it perfectly, like I was talking about before with the water. You want to make sure that it's exact. Otherwise, it's not one-to-one, right? True one-to-one is by weight. Tea, let's move to the next slide, Shawn. Back to, there we go, syrups. So tea is a really easy one. Let's say, I think a lot of people know the cocktail, know Arnold Palmer's, and then there's the John Daly, which is like the boozy version of, like let's pick another golfer who's known for being quite a heavy drinker. Let's name a drink after him. And it also has tea and a bunch of booze in it. A really cool way to make a tea syrup is to steep a tea that comes with a lot of flavor, that maybe has a bunch of different layers like bergamot and mint and something. You can throw a bunch together. Maybe there's a tea that you make at home that's a blend of things that you really like. Do a steep where for every 750 ml bottle, you're steeping 3 bags. You want that flavor to really come through. And then for that amount of tea that you make, consider that to be the water and then have the exact same amount of sugar. And then you'll have that tea as a syrup and it'll be very flavorful. So 3 tea bags per 750 ml of water. Steep it for normal amount that you'd steep, maybe a little longer, somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. Take the bags out, make sure that there's no particulates in there, and then get the exact same amount of sugar, blend it, and you'll have a perfect syrup made from that tea. You can also do fruits, herbs, spices. I put other here as like citrus peel because that's different than fruit. Cacao, although is a fruit, it's still a very potent flavor that you need to be careful of. Almond is a good one. If you're like blanching almonds for something else, you can use that water to make a syrup, and it's unbelievable. And then, of course, herbs is kind of like what we're doing now. I'm going to turn this off. I'll let that sit for a bit. Oh my God, that smells so good. You have to be really careful if you take the lid off of something that's had something spicy in it, like jalapeno, because the steam will go right up your nose and it will wake up your brain very quickly, depending on how many seeds are in there. All right, let's move forward to the next one.
We had one question, Dänny. Is turbinado sugar the same as demerara?
It's not. It's two different kinds of sugar, but it's very similar in style. I would consider both of them to be kind of brown sugars. But yeah, they're usually large cluster, large crystal sugars, but a turbinado and demerara have a little bit different flavor. But you'll find, again, sometimes on cocktail menus, you'll see that somebody actually calls out turbinado or demerara. There are also demerara rums, where the rum is a sugarcane distillate. So if someone is using a demerara sugar cane to actually make that rum, then it could be a demerara sugar. So you'll see that on cocktail menus as well.
Well, I just saw some party hats appear, so I think someone is really excited about that. Yeah.
And they're good. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still being distilled. So a lot of the time, the flavor profile that you would get off of a demerara rum comes through the age as well. So if it's aged in like a lightly charred barrel, I think that really pops the specific demerara flavor when you're tasting a demerara rum versus something that's been made from, a more, sugar cane that you'd find on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's move on to our next slide. All right. So here are the things that you're going to need are your shaker top, your shaker bottom, a Hawthorne strainer, a jigger. The one that I'm using here is that's what's called a Japanese jigger. So I've got 1 ounce on the small part, 2 ounces on the large part. And then inside, depending, actually I can do it right here. Inside, depending, there are lines that show you, see the one here is 1.5. And then if I flip it, well, I've got a half and a 3/4, and then all the way to the top is 1 ounce. So that's something to keep in mind. I think a lot of people do it incorrectly. Let's go to our herbs and our pepper, Shawn. Sorry, it won't let me control in here. There we go. One more. What's before this? Cilantro. Okay. This is something that is very polarizing. So what I wrote here is you either love it or you have to kindly ask your guests to leave when they tell you they don't. I'm so sorry. Like, I'm in the cilantro camp. I apologize for those people who hate it. It's not your fault. It's genetic. Same thing with people who don't like lavender. Same people who can't do this or this, right? Some people can do it, some people can't. It's like it's in our chromosomes. So cilantro is very unique, but it's a very potent flavor. So for those who do not like it, a little bit in a recipe can ruin the recipe. So make sure that if you're making this drink for someone, that they like cilantro. Otherwise, you may as well give someone who's a vegan goat cheese, because it'll be the worst for them. This is the important thing. You'll see a lot of times, especially in other countries, you'll see that coriander gets used almost interchangeably with cilantro. So coriander, the name coriander comes from the genus species of the plant itself. And so they do come from the same plant. But the cilantro is like the herbs, the thing that you are used to seeing. Oh, well, I can just show you here. The thing that you're used to seeing here, right? Those are like the little herbs, just like you would see mint or parsley or whatever. That is the cilantro. Coriander, although the entire plant is considered the coriander, when you're talking about coriander in recipes, it's usually what's made from the base of the plant itself that's used to make dried like powder or chunks or whole pieces that can be used. So they are distinct. And as you'll see on the slide, what I wrote was, for the most part, when you are going to other countries, they're usually correct. And the American way of doing things is, or the nomenclature is not accurate. This is one of those times where it really is only the US that distinguishes between coriander and cilantro correctly. So, okay, USA, go USA. Well done. But yeah, make sure that when you're following a recipe, if it calls for coriander, if it's a book that comes from the UK, make sure that you're looking at the end result And if what you need is the herb, make sure you're using the herb, because a lot of times it can just be the spice. That's right. Thanks, Shawn. Perfect. All right, let's go to jalapeno, aka jalapeno.
What is jalapeno?
Next one forward, jalapeno. I'm kidding.
Thank you. Thank you.
There we go. Jalapeno. So as I wrote, much like picking a partner, choosing the right jalapeno can be its own adventure. So has anybody had padron peppers, or if you go to your favorite Japanese restaurant, you can get anyone? Shawn?
Shishito?
That's right. So shishito peppers or padron peppers. This is the time of year, usually June, when the ratio of hot versus mild is much higher. So right now it's probably about 4 or 5 to 1. Where 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 are going to be hot, and then other times of the year it's usually 1 in 12. So it's about half that, right? So the likelihood of getting a yummy spicy one is much higher now. But it's the same with jalapenos. We grew some here at home, and usually when we grow stuff here, they end up being low in seeds but high in heat. But usually the way, especially when you're making a syrup, the fewer seeds you use in your concoction, the more seeds you use, the hotter it's going to be. The fewer seeds you use, the more mild it's going to be. But it's not always the case. You always want to taste. Ideally, if you have like a monster one like this, you would slice it through the middle and take a slice in the middle. That's going to give you a really good idea of how many seeds, because then you can see both through the top and the bottom, like how many seeds there are. And it'll also give you a really good idea of what the heat level of that particular pepper is going to be. And you have to be very careful, because it can be very mild. It can blow your socks off. So consistency is very hard to keep unless you are taking notes and you're very good at tasting everything. So for example, if you're making a syrup like this one, this is pretty straightforward. I'm following a recipe. I'm using exactly 1 ounce of sliced jalapeno. I'm using exactly 2 ounces of whole cilantro. I'm using the exact same amount of water and the exact same amount of sugar. I'm following the instructions. However, if I'm not also tasting the cilantro to make sure it's flavorful, tasting the jalapeno to see what the heat level is, there may be a surprise, and you're not going to have the same thing that you made the first time. So something to keep in mind. We'll let it keep steeping for a little bit. And then Shawn, if you wouldn't mind going back to the jalapeno. So yeah, what I wrote in here, the main key for syrups is to taste beforehand, and depending on the spice level, choosing how many seeds to include. That's specific for the jalapeno. But it's the same thing with cilantro. You may find a bunch that is very aromatic and doesn't have a lot of flavor, or something that you take a bite of the leaf and it's very tasty and pungent and does not come through as much on the nose, right? A lot of that's going to come through on the extraction of something like this when you're steeping it in heat. Next slide, please. All right, so we did sugar already. What's after sugar?
Do you want to go back to limes and agave?
Take it back. I can't. It's not allowing me to do it. So go all the way back to the beginning of stuff.
Okay.
What's before limes? Oh yeah, let's do this. Now we're ready for tequila. So this delightful little thing right here is reposado tequila, and it's reposado because it has been aged between 2 and 12 months in usually used oak barrels, and it's delicious. So there are a lot of misnomers about tequila, a lot. So I feel like if you've ever had a bad experience with tequila, I would love to see your stories in the chat. Thank you very much in advance, because I'm sure someone out there is like, can't even smell it anymore, right? There's something about gin and tequila that someone may have had when they were like on their 21st birthday, had it from a plastic bottle. It was not great. They ended up not feeling well, and forever those two smells will stick with them. So one of the things is I think a lot of us first experience tequila as a mixto. Now, there are some great mixto out there. That means that it's not 100% agave. That means that it could also be sugarcane distillate or corn distillate or something else. It really only needs to be 51% Blue Weber agave, and then the rest can be something else. But it's also a lot less expensive. If I have a thing over here like corn or sugar that grows every season and that produces a huge amount of yield, it's going to be a lot less expensive than something that grows that takes, you know, between 5 and 7 years on average to mature, and is a lot of work to take and cut up and carry from field to production facility and crush and ferment and distill. So there's a lot that goes into making agave. So if you could make it less expensively, you would. So that's what a mixto is. But there are some mixto that are different percentages, like 80-20, 90-10, 75-25, and they're excellent. They're very well made. Most of the time, what you want to look for on a bottle says 100% Blue Weber agave, right? And that means that it is officially a tequila that's 100% agave. Shawn, if you go back to the tequila slide. So when in doubt, add more tequila, right? Now, some of the other misnomers are, where does tequila come from? And I think we've all at one point or another seen a cartoon where you stick a spigot into a cactus and turn it on and magically tequila comes out. Yeah, it does not work that way. You are not getting a decent tequila before somewhere between, as I said before, 5 to 7 years once the agave is planted, right? So, and a lot of places are letting them mature longer than that. There's been a big demand. So the last couple of years, people are picking them a little bit younger, and you can tell there are producers that are using agave that's younger. It's not great. What other tequila for this recipe, Pamela? I would say gin would work well. A lightly aged rum would work well. I'm thinking more flavor profiles for the cocktail than a replacement for tequila. Those would all work well. The gin would have to be a pretty mellow gin, because if you have something where the juniper is too heavy and you throw in cilantro, it may end up being way too vegetal, right? So maybe like a citrus gin, like the Malfi con Limon or the Citadel or Tanqueray 10, although it's very, very potent when it comes to the juniper and the coriander, like that coriander. It also is outstanding when it comes to lemon peel and citrus. So all of those are really good options. But yeah, like an añejo blanco rum or even like a lightly aged rum, I think would be outstanding. A citrus vodka could work, but I wouldn't recommend that you, like with flavored vodkas, you have to make sure that it's one that is not sweetened. Otherwise, it will throw this drink off, right? And most flavored vodkas are 35% and have additional sugar. So just something to keep in mind. If you have one of the kettle botanicals, that one is actually, I'm pretty sure, does not have sugar in it. But I think it's still 35%. It's worth looking into.
So if I had a sugary alcohol, Dänny, could I make a less sugary syrup to balance that?
I would always keep your, that's a great question, actually. Always keep your syrups at 1-to-1, because then you can always control the level of sweetness in the drink. And that's kind of the fun part. You have a 1-to-1 syrup and citrus like lime or lemon. Those two together will always be pretty close to being accurate, right? So let's say you just wanted to make lemonade at home. Forget you're making a cocktail. You're just making limeade, right? So you take exactly 2 ounces of lime juice and exactly 2 ounces of a 1-to-1 simple syrup. It's going to be amazing lime juice. And you can like I always do 1 citrus, 3/4 sweetener, because I like mine a little more tart, but still balanced. So you can always start off with less sweetener and then add to bring it up to make them equal parts, but you can't take it away once it's in there. Then you're like throwing an extra lime. It's a whole thing. But if you're always making your syrups 1-to-1 and keeping them at 1-to-1, it's very easy to control. Even if you get to a recipe where they're calling for a 2-to-1 sugar syrup, right? Making your own thing 1-to-1 is always an easy way to go. So if, for example, you did use, a citrus vodka, and there are now flavored tequilas as well that may have its own sort of residual sugar in it, you can always just use less of the syrup. So if the recipe calls for 2 ounces of tequila, 1 ounce of the syrup, do 2 ounces of this sweetened tequila, maybe start off with half an ounce of the syrup, and you're like, oh no, it still needs more. Then go to 3/4. And if it's still not enough, then you can add a little bit.
Thank you.
So this is what I call adding a fat quarter. That is, if you're measuring something that's a quarter, you go a little bit over the top, and that's going to be somewhere between a quarter and a half, right? If you don't want to get into eighths of an ounce, right? You don't need to go to like 5/8. So, all right, great. Back to tequila, please. So tequila, this is very important that you all follow this very carefully. Tequila is A, delicious, B, very tasty, C, quite difficult to make, D, one of the most regulated spirits on earth, and E, yummy. So I think 3 out of the 5, you've got no problem. I mentioned the CRT on here. CRT is the regulatory commission that is in charge of making sure that tequila is made correctly. So tequila is a big export for Mexico, and the unfunny joke that we usually make is, if there is a town in Los Altos, in like the highlands of Jalisco, that is making tequila, and there's a pothole in the middle of a major intersection that destroys cars and injures people, that might be there for 2 years. But if one of the distilleries nearby calls the CRT and says, hey, we need to open this barrel, we need somebody from the CRT here to watch and make sure that we're not adding stuff to it, they'll be there in 15 minutes, right? It's taken very seriously. So if you ever look at a bottle of tequila, it will always say CRT and then say NOM with a number on it. That number is the number of the distillery where that tequila was made. Now, you cannot say the same for any other spirit. It can tell you what region it comes from. But with tequila, it actually tells you what distillery it came out of. And it's really interesting. So if you were to go to Costco and buy Kirkland tequila, you can look up that nom and see all the other products that are being made there. So although you can't see that one of the Kirkland vodkas, you can see that one of the Kirkland vodkas is made in France, I can tell you for sure that it is not made at Grey Goose, and it's not Grey Goose. It is made somewhere else in France. That is true. But no matter what, if you didn't know, you wouldn't know, because unlike tequila, other spirits don't have that kind of information on the bottle. It's not regulated in that way, right? So, Shawn, if you would kindly go to the agave slide. One last thing on the one, you don't have to move it. You do not have to have an expensive tequila for it to be good. However, that being said, if you are spending $10 for a liter of tequila and it's not near a distillery, it's not necessarily recommended. I would question that a little bit. You may end up with a little bit of a headache after that one. All right, back to agave. So the rules of agave are quite simple. Like, this is a monoculture. Tequila must be made from blue Weber agave, which is grown in 5 of the states of Mexico, all listed here: Jalisco, Guanajuato, Michoacan, Nayarit, and Tamaulipas, right? Most of the tequila that we have all had comes from Jalisco, right? You have the highlands and you have the valley. The town of Tequila is in the valley, and both of them are within 2 hours of Guadalajara. Really well-known tequila area. And when people go and do like tequila tours, that's usually where they go, right? So people ask often about mezcal or raicilla or sotol or bacanora. Sotol is made from a completely different kind of plant, a similar style of plant, but it's not agave, whereas all the others are made from agave, but different kinds of agave. Tequila can only be made in those 5 states and only come from that one type of agave. So one of the things that's really important is biodiversity. And that's one of the things that both tequila makers in Mexico have been working on frantically, because God forbid there's some sort of phylloxera type disease or, bug or worm or something that really loves blue agave. It's going to decimate that population and in turn tequila in general, because tequila can only be made from that one type of agave. Right. So, and the other thing, it needs to be made and bottled in Mexico. So if, for example, you are a liquor distributor in Hong Kong and you have access to really incredible 100% agave liquid, but you don't want to waste all of the bottles and the fuel and the weight in getting separate bottles to Hong Kong, but you can ship a container of the liquid and then repackage it. There's a company called Eco Spirits, which actually has this really cool tote that's about yay big. I think it is 5 liters. And it comes in different sizes, 5 liters all the way up to, I think, 5 gallons. And it's a tote that has a little spigot, and that's how it comes to you. From a local distributor, takes it from the container, filters it, fills it, brings it to your bar, and you can either put it in bottles at your bar, or literally, if you're going through it all the time, have it on your wall and have that, open that spigot and use it. Technically, you'd have to say agave distillate. You would not be able to call it tequila, because it would have to be bottled in Mexico. But for those in the know, if they're like, listen, I just want good product, I don't really care about the marketing or the branding of it, I just want good product. If it says on the menu agave distillate and you know that it's 100% agave, that really is tequila from Mexico that's been brought over in a different way, no one cares as long as it's good. Oh yeah, there we go. So the agave Venn diagram is something that's really interesting. So what people don't think about, they're like, well, I love tequila, but I hate mezcal, right? Tequila is mezcal. It's not a Venn diagram so much as it is concentric circles. This is tequila that can be made from one type of agave in 5 different states, and it's within a larger circle that is mezcal, which can be made from over 30 different kinds of agave in 9 different states. So tequila is a mezcal. So the mezcal, for the most part, I think people think of mezcal, they think of smoky. That's just the production method, right? And different people do it at different levels of smoke. But technically, tequila is mezcal, right? And here I also list mezcal, bacanora, raicilla. Those are 3 different, 3 other spirits that are made from different types of agave. And then, of course, I marked on here delicious again, just in case you had forgotten the other things that I had put on the other slide. Do we have any questions about tequila or agave or anything like that? Because I think, again, it's really misunderstood, and I want to make sure that before we dive into the cocktail, it's considering the part, this is the agricultural part of the U.S. Botanical Garden talk. I want to make sure that we are that we're answering any of those questions.
Thanks, Dänny. And while
go ahead.
While folks are writing in the chat, if there are questions, I was curious because when you were making those, when you were going through the syrup making before, in our 3rd session of Briny, Boozy, Bubbly, we'll be doing homemade meads, which kind of starts in the same way with a syrup that then we let some yeast into to turn into alcohol. But I imagine tequila is a lot more complicated than like taking the agave sweetener that I might find in the grocery store, or sort of like agave juice and then turning it into tequila. Is that true?
So little did you know, you have touched upon something that is a big topic of conversation right now in the tequila world. So, hearkening back to what I was talking about, tequila being based on a monoculture of blue Weber agave, there are people who are already looking for alternatives. Either, they're growing agave in South Africa and Israel and Southern California and Texas, right? They're looking for alternative ways to produce agave distillate that's as close to what you would find in the 5 states where it can be legally produced. There are also people that are making it from agave syrup. You can, in fact, do that, right? I have not yet tasted one, and it comes through a lot a lot of competitions that I judge for. I don't know what I'm having. All I know is that it's an agave distillate, and we can ask, hey, you know, how is this made? Sometimes it's just called agave distillate because it's coming from another location, but sometimes it's agave distillate because it's coming from made from syrup. So that is a thing, and you will find them on the market. So thank you for bringing that up. I honestly would not have thought of that, and it is something that people are going to start to see.
Very cool. Thank you. Well, no other questions have come in for now.
Great.
We'll let you know if they do.
Perfect. So let's make the drink. What do you say? Are we ready for it?
I say yes. Yeah,
Okay.
Let's do it.
So the last but not least is the lime juice. Okay. This is another thing, just like sugar, just like tequila, just like, you know, any ingredient that goes into a larger product. Make sure that, you know, not all limes are the same, right? So most of what we're getting here are going to be key limes, but you'll also find Bear's limes, which are a little bit more tangy. You'll also find calamansi, which is super tangy. People don't really consider that lime, although it's quite similar. And then there's kaffir lime, which I wouldn't really drink that juice. It's mostly used for the leaves, but it's so interesting and fun, and you can make good things out of it. But for this, I would use your standard press. This is one that is like for my bar kit, because I'm doing lemons and limes. Usually when I know I'm only doing limes, I'm going to do the ones that are smaller because I'm going to get more of the juice out of it, right? I don't want as big of a space in it if I'm doing key limes. But what I did is I pre-juiced it into this guy right here so we could Martha Stewart this a little bit and actually get to the making part. So I've got my tequila here, which I pre-measured to 2 ounces. I have my lime here. We are going to measure things because I want you to see how that works. And we're going to do everything. I like to do everything into the small tin because it depends. If I'm dealing with volume with a lot of people or behind an actual bar, I'm going to go for my larger container, and I know where in here I need to stop for the liquid so I can properly seal it. But since we're making one drink now and I want to control it, I'm going to do it in the smaller guy. So Shawn, if you can pretty please pull up the recipe so everyone can take one last look at that before we dive in, that would be super helpful. So again, we've got our Reposado tequila. Reposado means rested, and that's, you know, barrel between 2 and 12 months. We have our 3/4 fresh lime juice. We have a little bit of cilantro that I left over in this plate, like as a garnish, and I might find a better one. And then you have 3/4 ounce. So like we call this our herbaceous margarita syrup because I think there's a lot of people who are afraid of cilantro, even though they don't realize that they do like it. But it really makes for a great herbaceous margarita. And but here I'm calling it cilantro jalapeno. That was our original name, and that's the stuff that we made here together. So I'm going to do the syrup first because then I can actually use my other ingredients to clear out my jigger, which is nice. So normally I would do it a lot more nice and neat, but because we just did this fresh and together, look at that color. Love that. Okay. I'm gonna pour that 3/4 ounce right there. Now, just like I mentioned before, you really want it all the way to the line. Somebody might look at this and be like, oh, that's way too full. It really is not. It should be all the way up to the line that shows 3/4 in the jigger. If you have a jigger that does not have lines, you really want it to be all the way up to there. Like it's pretty close to the top. And that's kind of how it is with graduated cylinders, where not a lot of volume here, much more volume as you get closer. It's the same thing that I think weirds people out, that this line right here is 1.5 in a 2 ounce jigger, really close to the top. I think it weirds people out, but that's how a graduated cylinder works. Okay, now we're gonna do 3/4 of my lime. And again, this is a really easy way to construct cocktails in general, where you're doing the same amount of your 1-to-1 syrup as you are your citrus. Pour that in there. And for the most part, when I write recipes, I'll write them like they are on the slide, where it shows the booze first, because then it immediately tells me what kind of drink I'm making. and also like preps, helps me prep all of my things. But when I'm making the drink, a lot of the times I will save the booze part for last, because if I screw up an earlier part of the recipe where the thing that I'm pouring doesn't cost me $60 a bottle, it cost me, 10 cents to make, then I throw that out and re-pour. Whereas I don't necessarily want to do that with this tequila. Now I'm pouring the full 2 ounces in here and going straight in there. Now, Shawn, if you would be so kind as to take us to the ice slide, that would be delightful.
I will do my best.
No problem. So this is a piece of the puzzle that people don't consider an ingredient, and it is very much an ingredient. That's why we went to Chandler Bing to get his commentary on this particular slide. It's really important that you know what kind of ice you're using. If you look at that main image, you see compressed pebble ice next to what I like to call hotel ice. It has like a lot of air bubbles in it. It's broken up into pieces. It looks like it's already like on its way to being diluted. Whereas the one on the left, although is cloudy, it looks very dry. Best possible bet, and this is the reason why people started doing, like that really hard compressed clear ice like you see in the upper left-hand corner, is I can put, whiskey on the rocks and it's going to dilute very slowly with the ice that's in that hand right there, right? So what I have in my fridge is what you see in the bottom left and what you see on the left of the two comparative ices. It's a really interesting pebble ice. Oh, it's uncrushed right now. Just kidding. Toss that. Good thing I didn't throw that right into the tin. So this is a surprise. I did not know it was going to be like this when I purchased this fridge. And I got very happy because I think people go to Sonic to buy bags of stuff all the time because it makes killer party ice. Now, a really cool other thing that I would love to show you that is kind of a bartender trick and is very helpful for volume, and also if you're working at like a resort where you're dealing with a lot of blender drinks, is to reverse measure the ice that you're going to need for your glass. So if, for example, I were doing a drink that needed to like end up in the rocks, and I'm not straining it over fresh ice, I'm dumping the whole thing, which a lot of time you're doing for yourself when you don't need to be fancy. The amount of ice that you put into the tin should be the glass and a little bit more. So if my drink in here is 3/4 is 3.5 ounces of liquid. And this is a 10.5 ounce single old-fashioned glass. If I were to fill it all the way to the top, even with dilution and air, if I didn't go over the top with the ice, then it's still not going to fill up the glass. Whereas if I go a little bit over the top, throw that into the tin, shake it, dump it back into the glass, I don't even have to look at it. It's going to be perfectly to the top, right? For this particular thing, and you can drink it any way you'd like. When Patrick created this cocktail, he did it as one that he wanted up in kind of in a coupe, right? So if you really wanted to, you could measure, as much in here in the glass. But quite frankly, because you're straining it, you don't really need to. You really just want to keep in mind like how much you are shaking and for how long, what the temperature is in the room, and the quality of the ice, because ice is not all the same. And if you're working outside and it's 90 degrees and you're shaking and the ice already wasn't that good in the first place, you do not have to shake that long. So one of the things that's really important is you don't have to shake for 5 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. If you ever see a recipe that says that, ignore it. The correct way to think about shaking is until it's cold. Okay? You want that tin, once you're shaking it, to be ice cold before it goes back into the glass. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to pour that ice in there. And I'm going to shake this until my tin is very cold. Okay. And so when you have a Hawthorne strainer like this, you'll notice in this camera, let's leave the foregrid. I like that, Shawn. In this camera, you'll notice there's more room for this to move around. If you really want to make sure that you don't want ice chips and you want to strain it, pour it back into the smaller part of the tin, the bottom tin, and you'll see it's not moving now. It's a little bit of a tighter seal because it's smaller. All right. Now, what I like to do is I like to grab I keep my coops in the freezer just for fun. I'm grabbing another sprig so that you guys can all get a fresh one. And then I'm going to get my coop out of the freezer. And what that does is it not only keeps the drink colder longer, but you see that? It frosts up really nicely. So I'm going to actually pour that here, pour this so you guys can see it right in front of you. Give that a little jiggle. And then I'm going to pour that right into the glass. Oh, and you see, because when I poured earlier from the pot itself, there's definitely a couple pieces of cilantro in there because it came through the syrup, right? So I would always, if you're going to put it into a bottle, I would always filter it out. Now I'm going to lay this little cilantro right on the top, float that on there as my garnish. I'm going to raise that up so you guys can see that here. See that nice little garnish? I've got that other little speck over here. Wait, over here. That other little speck that came from the syrup, but I can garnish it that way. You can also be fun and like take a ring of like a jalapeno and put it on the side of the glass. And that's a really nice indicator, much like on a, like a map legend. It gives you a sense of what's inside the drink. So you can do something really cool where you have like a ring of jalapeno and you put it right there. And then you also have the cilantro. So it's telling you just by looking at the drink that it's a cilantro jalapeno cocktail. And here's the part where we enjoy it.
I'm so struck, Dänny. Like mine,
Cheers.
I often think that like, well, we'll taste and then. Ooh, oh my God, that's amazing.
Good question. Would the pickled jalapeno be too strong a garnish? No. In fact, I would encourage it because the smell of something fermented or vinegary, whereas like if you were to add it into the cocktail, would potentially make it a little too acidic. Having it as the aromatics will really take you in a very specific direction, which I think it would be great for this cocktail.
I'm also just really struck by your vessel. Like I felt unprepared. I had this coffee mug and then I was shaking in this jar and I poured my ice out into a different vessel so I could use this as the glass because it seemed, at least prettier and clearer than the coffee mug. But when I see it in comparison with your glass, I'm like, oh, that really does matter. Maybe, how strongly does it matter? Like in the world of can I drink it? Yes, I can drink it. And if I'm home watching Netflix and I made this for myself, I have no feelings about it. But if I wanted to present this to someone else, it looks so sad in comparison with what you made that looks so beautiful.
It's funny that you say that. Like, I do a lot of events, and one of the things that always strikes me when I go to another event is that people use vessels that make no sense, right? So it's like going to a networking party and they're serving like raw onions, raw garlic, and fish. And I'm like, you want people to get close together and talk and get to meet one another, and you're giving them these things to eat where you're like, hello, and all they're smelling is raw garlic and raw onion and fish. To an event where there's nowhere to put things down, everybody is like talking and meeting and like shaking hands. Don't give them these delicate little martini glasses, right? So this is one of my favorite glasses. This is a 5.5 ounce champagne coupe. I also don't, because of the level of liquid, like you can see here, because I've had a little sip off the top, the level of liquid is very high at the beginning. So unless someone is sitting at a bar and they're going to enjoy it at the bar, I wouldn't necessarily serve it with what's called a high wash line. That's where the liquid comes up to. I wouldn't necessarily serve this cocktail with a high wash line to anyone who is walking around, because it's going to get messy, right? There's nothing wrong with like a rocks glass or a jar or something like that, especially if you're enjoying it at home. But if you like glasses like these, they're not expensive. They're super solid. If you drop them on anything other than, hard tile or rock, they usually do pretty well. And you don't always have to pour the full drink. You can basically make 2 drinks in the tin, what would be the volume of 2 drinks, and then pour it into 3 glasses. So everybody's getting to enjoy it. You get to enjoy it colder for longer, and you have enough space in the glass where if you want to walk around with this cocktail, you can.
Mm-hmm. Do you have other tips for choosing the appropriate vessel for a cocktail? And I suppose like once you've gotten picky about things like that, you probably have, an appropriate bowl for cereal and an appropriate vessel for stew. But just thinking more broadly, like how do you think about the best glass for a drink?
I mean, for the most part, if it's something that you're creating, it's whatever you want. Otherwise, I'm way more of a function over form person. If somebody wants to, like I was just honoring, Patrick's original creation here and wanting to make it like he intended it. But this could easily, as I was saying before, it could also easily be a rocks drink, right? It would be just as refreshing. It would be just as tangy. It would work just as well. Highly recommend that you do whatever works best for you, right? But one of the things that one of the reasons I like to chill, stem glassware beforehand, like a coupe or a martini glass, is that once you strain it off of this thing and it's no longer on ice, it's only getting warmer and warmer and warmer, right? So if you can have one last ditch effort to keep it cool, that is the glass. And it's another reason why it's good to hold the glass like this and not hold it like that, because then your hand's just heating it up.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I see Libby's, I was just going to say, Libby's writing in the chat, is there a less spicy version of this cocktail? Or if you're not loving jalapeno, but you like cilantro, or would you just find another cocktail, abandoned ship?
No, actually, so mine didn't turn out spicy. I tasted this jalapeno beforehand. And it just depends. Like, this is the beginning of the season, right? Whereas in the actual, shaker and spoon syrup, this product is made with like perfect spice level. Because what we did is we actually did a big bulk of it, so we could get at the exact heat temperature that we wanted, spice level we wanted, and then we were able to, then put it into bottles. So we had much more control over it than when you're making it on your own. You can always steep it longer if you want it spicier, etc. But no, I wouldn't bail on it. I would say use fewer jalapeno, use one. But for the most part, the flavor that's going to come through more is going to be the cilantro. And of course, the type of sugar you use.
Yeah, I also think this is probably a great, I was watching with such admiration as you weighed all of your ingredients, because I don't own a kitchen scale. I mostly eyeball things, and and I can tell based on the flavor of this drink, like my syrup is spicy and is really flavorful, but I didn't measure the syrup. I didn't measure the lime juice. I just like squirted the lime right here, and I can tell that something, it's good, but probably why I'm not tasting the spices because I should have added more syrup.
It's like the difference of bakers versus just people between bakers and chefs. Chefs are like salt bay all the time. They're doing like a little bit of a thing, like they're tasting or whatever. Whereas like people who are baking are using very specific recipes. And it's important, like time and heat and measurements, especially when you want things to rise.
Yeah.
Right. So like for you, you're using on the stuff that you're fermenting, you're using a basic framework that's based on a recipe. And then you get to a certain point where like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and that's fine for that. And it is for drinks also. I don't want people to feel like they don't have the equipment. Like that was one of the things at Shaker and Spoon that we decided really early on is we didn't want people to feel obligated to buy certain spirits. We didn't want them to feel obligated to have fancy tools. But at one point or another, we made them available to people because a lot of people were like, oh, I want to do it the way that the original bartender intended, which is great. So we went out and we found like our favorite tools in a very inexpensive format so that you can get them all together and you don't have to like get some here and get some there and get some there. So like that's something that we make available to our subscribers and our customers now. But it's just to make your life easier. You could just as easily do it with a jar that you can seal. I would, however, always recommend that you get a good jigger, right? Because this is the easiest. You get a Japanese jigger or you get one of those OXO ones, which are not really meant for cocktails, but people use them all the time because they're not as accurate, but they're clear. They're really easy to read, and it has ounces and milliliters. It's very easy. But this tool right here is the thing that you probably need most, and then all the other things are like you could use a Tupperware container to shake if you really wanted to.
And I think if you got into a bind, isn't 3 tablespoons equal to an ounce?
Yeah, you can absolutely do use instead of eyeballing it, I would use measuring spoons, right? The only thing you can eyeball things when there's a lot of it. It's difficult to eyeball things when the container is small, right? But if you're doing something that's based off of measuring spoons, you're probably in really good shape and you won't be that far off, right? That's what I was saying before. Like if you're using, say, this container and you fill it up with sugar, dump it, and then fill it up the same amount of water, dump it. Although you're not doing it by weight, it's still going to work. And in a pinch, easy peasy.
Thank you, Dänny.
Yeah. You need to do the flavor pairing. We're
going to get there. I just want to get these last two questions out there before we do. Would you recommend a salt on the rim or anything like that with this margarita? And any suggestions for doing this in a non-alcoholic version?
Yes. One thing that I actually usually recommend for a drink like this, citrus, tequila, savory, pinch of salt in the shaker. And that's even for people who don't like, I don't like a salt rim, but you do a pinch of, in fact, Shawn, if you have access to a little bit of salt right now.
Yeah.
And because you've already like had a little bit of the drink, I would really just do a pinch, put it in there and give it a stir. I'm going to do it right into the cocktail. And then try it again.
Okay, and I took MC's advice too and put in a little more syrup. I'm going to add even a little bit more just to like keep up in that kick level.
That's another cool thing that you can do also. If you do want it hotter, you can throw a jalapeno into the tin and do a really light press on it, right? So if you don't have a muddler, you can, but you do have a squeezer. When you're squeezing your lime into the drink, throw another jalapeno into the lime and press it.
Oh my gosh,
right?
You're serious. You're not messing around here.
No, yeah.
And that salt was great. It added like a little umami basement to what was already happening.
Salt is a fun thing. Like we talk about this a lot when I'm doing trainings. We talk about little tips and tricks that you bring from other aspects of kitchen experience. Chocolate chip cookies it wasn't until maybe 10 years ago that in recipes you'd see people say to add a pinch of salt. Everybody knew to add a pinch of salt. And when I was a kid, I remember they never even talked about putting vanilla extract in it. And like doing a little bit of vanilla extract makes all the other flavors pop. But adding salt makes the sugar pop, makes the butter pop, makes the chocolate pop. And just like with this, it makes my savory ingredients, which are my pepper and my herb, both pop. And it makes the sweet taste sweeter without adding sugar, right? Yeah. So I would always add a pinch of salt into something like this. You can always do a rim. If you were going to do this particular cocktail, I would do something fun like tahini. If you guys are familiar with tahini, I'll write it in here. So this is how to spell it, Tajin. It is a very common Mexican mixed salt that has like dried chili and salt in it. It's not spicy. It's more salty than anything else. Like if you were to add it into something like you were adding chili, you would get way too salty, right? And it really is a salt that has the other things. But it makes for a great rim. And what I always recommend people to do is put a little bit into like a flat plate, do half of the glass with your lime, and then just do the outside, right? So that way, let's say you're having a bunch of friends over, you can pre-rim the glasses hours before people arrive and just let the glasses sit out, right? The only time you don't want to do that is unless you have a freezer that has big shelves. Let the rim dry on there and then put all the glasses so they're sitting upright. So they're not only rims, but they're frozen, right? It's really nice. And the red tahini with this drink, it just pops. And then that way people can sort of lick it and go back to the drink, lick it, go back to the drink. So if there are people that don't like it, they go have a full whole half of the glass where they're not touching that, whatever you've rimmed it with anyway. Super easy to do. But the pinch of salt into certain things works wonders.
Yeah, I love how you described letting it dry on too. I love really kind of going to town to get it off the glass. It's like a dog trying to eat peanut butter inside of a
I'd much rather, as a guest, I'd much rather have that than to like lightly tap the glass and then boom, there's salt and sugar, right?
Yeah. So MC suggested mixing this syrup with tonic water to give us a little virgin experience. Any other recommendations for how to translate this in a non-alcoholic way?
There's a couple of things. There's a product that just came out that's called the Abstinence Spirits. Abstinence Spirits is the company. They make a product called Cape Agave. It is a really excellent alternative agave. And it has a little touch of smoke in it that's very fun. If you don't like smoky at all, then I would recommend that you find the seedlip agave. Both are available online and you can ship them anywhere because they're not alcoholic, right? I think they have a thing right now where they were doing something separate with Shaker and Spoon. So if you use the code Shaker and Spoon, I'm pretty sure it gives you some kind of discount. I have no idea, but give it a shot. No, obviously Shaker and Spoon, no spaces. But yeah, Abstinence Spirits, their products are stunning. And even as someone who does imbibe, I think having the non-alc, and Shawn, you remember this when I was in DC, we talked about it because that's what I was there for. I think having really terrific non-alcoholic, what I call proxy spirits, alternatives, where you can find a recipe anywhere in any book, in any bar, and just hot swap it out, like tequila for this and gin for this and whiskey for this. Having those things on the market is so great, especially when they're made well and they're not junky, right? You can easily make a non-alc, but then it's going to be sugary and kind of, right? Some of these new ones that are out are really excellent. And I think Abstinence has done a great job.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, if there are other questions, we have just about 10 minutes left. And also, if folks have gotten a chance to make either the syrup or the cocktail itself, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. Want to do this pairing for just a hot minute. I'm going to, I feel like, Dänny, you said something that I love about really tasting all of the ingredients as they're going in, so you have a sense. So just to give ourselves another little sensory experience, we can really see the colors in both of those. Give a little smell compare. Wow, the salty kind of briny this is really showing.
I can't wait for you to have them together because they're going to be so good.
Yeah, and already the cocktail is bringing in a lot of those like sweet but a little bit tangy notes, and I can already smell the way that the tangy from here and the kind of salty from here are going to be friends. They're like, there's a Venn diagram where they're in agreement so far. So I'm going to go ahead and just get one of these beans out. And I do notice that sometimes these are squirters, so you really have to be careful. Okay. Wow. I'm so a fan. And I think the spicy herbs or the sweet herbs in this, the cloves, the fennel, there's a little jalapeno in here also, is giving it like a little kick.
And this is just from what you made in the last session, or is it something that you prepped for the last session?
This is what I made right after the last session. It was like those jars I was showing, and then I filled them with brine after we were done.
Okay.
Okay. Wow, that's really lovely. Yeah, I feel like my taste buds are doing a like whoa 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 whoa. There's something about that kind of like sour, acidic. Um, it's not. There's like a tartness to the margarita in a way that the pickle is giving me more of that like deep salty flavor, but the spice is crossing over through both in a way I really like. It also makes me curious, and I know sometimes when pairing, we don't want things that overlap too much, but it makes me think about trying these pickles with a cilantro instead of the dill, and what that would do. And we talked a little bit about what it would be like if we wanted to put a little of our brine into this cocktail or another cocktail. Would you recommend that, or do you think that'd be too much, Donnie?
No, we talked about that, and I think it's actually a great idea. So one of the things I recommended was, because again, what you're doing is you're adding more acid, and so you always want to keep. I'm going to talk about this in like I talked about in the first session a little now, and then again in the third. Math is really important. You really want to balance things out well. So the same thing. If I'm doing 3/4 of lime juice, I want to do 3/4 of a 1-to-1. A syrup that I made, that will always work. If I personally like things a little less sweet or a little more tart, I can lower that amount to keep my ratio of the citrus higher than the syrup, but I'm still at least using a 1-to-1 syrup and a lime or a lemon. I always know that those are going to pretty much balance well, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to do something like add in a little bit of my pickling liquid from the jar to go into the drink, I'm going to definitely lower my lime juice. So if I lower my lime juice to 3/4, I can add 1/4 of the vinegar. But I would start off really small. Like I would do 3/4 of lime and like 1/8 of your pickling liquid, because it may just be really overpowering. But it's one of the reasons why you're seeing pickle this, pickle that. There's actually a pickle beer called Donna's Pickle Beer. It's honestly, as a person who likes to ferment, you're gonna love this thing. Even if you're not a beer person, it is one of the most refreshing things I've ever tasted. And it doesn't matter if it's hot or cold outside, but if it's hot outside, it's extra refreshing. Because like there's something about that brine that just like cools you off. So it's the same kind of thing with cocktails. If you're like, ooh, this sounds good, it's refreshing, add 1/8, which is basically like a tablespoon, like add that in, or sorry, a teaspoon, add that in on top of 3/4 of lime, and you're like, oh, it still needs a little bit more of the flavor of the pungency from the pickling liquid, then add another 1/8 of the pickling liquid, but always make sure that you're keeping in mind that it's still liquid acid. So for people who are trying to do things that are stabilized or cocktails on tap or something where they're batching, they're using sometimes like ACV, apple cider vinegar, instead of a fresh lime, because they know that they can control it a little bit more.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm planning a wedding, so this batch cocktails, the like, large quantities are definitely something I'm paying attention to.
We actually have subscribers that have been with us for like 6+ of our 10 years who like become the people like in charge of their friends' weddings. Their friends like, hey, I want you to come up with a cocktail. And so they've learned over the years, like in our Facebook group or just like in interactions with other members or members of our team, they learn how to end up like making these batch things where all of a sudden you're serving 150, 200 people. Wow. But like I teach people how to make batch drinks that you can keep in your fridge for whether one person shows up or 30 people show up. Mm-hmm. There's certain things, especially like booze forward drinks, that you can keep in your fridge at all times. I have one, in fact, what I use my middle drawer for, because I'm an insane person, my middle drawer is different flavored sparkling waters. And then, of course, sherry, because you got to have sherry. Vermouth, because you got to have vermouth. And this thing, which is super cool. It's called Phony Negroni. It's a non-alc Negroni. And then this cocktail is one that I made. That's a gin base. It's basically like a very dry Negroni with actual booze in it, where I took the Campari and I coconut fat washed it. So it's this really cool complex cocktail that I have at any moment I want. I can just pour a little bit for a guest on ice or in a frozen glass.
That's great. So we've got just 5 minutes left, Dänny. There's one question in the chat, and then I think it'll just be about time to say goodbye. But do you happen to know of a good source of cascara syrup?
Yes. There are a couple different people that make it. They're not great. You could probably do a better job on your own. And really the key is going to be to go to I have a place near me called The Mill that has if I wanted to make like an artichoke syrup, which I did a couple of years ago, I could go and get like dried artichoke hearts from them and use that, right? So that I'm already doing something that's like dried and concentrate, and I can save that step of having to, dehydrate them myself. And you can find coffee husks and cherry husks. Otherwise, I would do find someone that has like cacao nibs, and find someone that has coffee fruit, and then just do like cherry extract and like make your own thing. Honestly, if I can find, you can message me, you can DM me via Insta. Like our info will be at the end. And I can see if I can find you a really solid recipe for that, because it is a very fun flavor and it's very specific.
I don't even know what cascara is, but now I'm going to have to look that up.
Basically a syrup that's made from like dried cherry and coffee fruit.
Amazing. Well, let's make sure we get that contact info up at the end. So thank you so much, Dänny. This has been amazing and good for my mood, in all sorts of ways.